So, Aging Prepared, let me give you a quick primer. I know you know a little bit about it, but to set the stage, the thesis of this initiative is to provide families with insights from senior focused specialists like us about how they can better prepare, but very specifically, what are they preparing for? The challenge that I have experienced a lot over the years is a lack of preparation for the moment when someone goes from independent,
Yeah.
i.e., surviving by themselves, maybe not, maybe they shouldn't have been,
Yeah.
but independent to needing care support. That very specific moment,
Yeah.
and that seems to be a blind spot for many, and so that is kind of the tailored focus of this initiative. My hope in doing it, we have done a lot of education over the years through Commonwise, and I've tried to do a bunch personally, and it's really hard to get folks in the room.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to get folks to think about this, let alone get them to commit a few hours to doing a workshop.
Yeah.
And so, what I'm really eager to do is kind of amalgamate these insights into bite-sized chunks that folks can consume more passively as they're beginning to wrestle with these issues or
Yeah.
wrestling with other issues contemporaneously. So, a couple of different, what I hope to talk about is I want to learn more about you and what you do, and how you came to the space. I want to get your opinions and experiences on this blind spot concept. Like, why does it exist? And the third question I have for you is, how do you start these conversations or pick these conversations back up? Like like those will be the sort of the core points that we get through.
Okay.
So I would love, part of what I think is interesting and I think will be instructive for many is how you came to this space as one example of the complexity and the nuance of the space itself.
Yeah.
And that lots of folks from lots of different backgrounds end up with a particular expertise that they want to develop and help folks through.
Yeah.
And so can you like start off by giving us like the history of Kate Barron and how she ended up?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you the abridged version, but it's kind of random. So I was in high school, and, the parents are like, get a job. And I ended up, my mom had a friend who was a nurse at an assisted living. And I got hired as a concierge. I was 17 years old. I'm like, you know what? You don't have to interact with the residents that live there. You're just going to answer the phone. Like, okay, I can do that. And I totally loved it. I loved the seniors, which really blindsided me. Like, you know. And who would have thought? And so I slowly started like interacting with the residents that lived at this building, and I really, really, really loved the population. And so,
Seed planted, yeah.
fast forward a few years later, go to college, ended up getting my education in therapeutic rec, and I just started with the population, right? New graduate, started with a big senior corporation up north, and loved it.
And so how long did you do that for?
Oh gosh, over 15 years.
So what's a normal day like in that life? Like what's the job?
So I mean, I worked in lots of like different pieces, right? You have the operations piece, which is mostly what I did. I managed a small, what we called neighborhoods. And it was a small neighborhood of like 20 residents who had mild cognitive impairment. It was a pilot program for this company, which is really cool. For 5 years, I was the director of an adult day center, which was really great. I had really little kids at the time. And so it was like, wait, senior care that closes. Like,
Yes.
that was good at
Yeah.
the time. And then I did sales for about a year in the senior care industry. Liked it, didn't love it. And so, operations and client, resident senior interaction was really my forte and what I liked the most.
Can you unpack what it is that draws you to working with seniors? Like, can you put a fine point on it, or is it just
Well,
emotional?
it's such a vulnerable population. I mean, when you think about a senior who is living alone or in independent living or in assisted living, I mean, yes, you're in assisted living. Yes, someone comes in to make your bed, maybe help you get dressed, give you your medications. But past that, if you don't have a social component and you have not made friends in that community as a senior, it's pretty lonely. And there's a lot of need. And I also think over the years in working with and for that population, there 99% of the time, that human being is so grateful, right? And I think at the end of the day, you're doing something good, you know?
It feels good to bring a solution to a problem. There's nothing more satisfying.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you're the only person they talk to that day,
Yeah.
which is sad, but
Yeah.
it's a whole nother podcast.
It seems to me like you make friends pretty easily. Is that true? Are you a naturally social person? And
Yeah.
so it's very aligned.
Yeah, all of my little report cards and, updates were talks a lot.
That's funny. Mine said the same thing.
Well, and another thing I love about the senior population, they have experienced so much. And I think there's such a generalization, for people who don't work in the industry. You see an old person and it's like, oh, they're old. You have an interaction where someone's talking to you, not the senior. There's sort of this generalization that they have less to offer or don't have things to offer. And it's just amazing, their life stories. And that never gets old.
No, it is a skill though to pull them out and to
Yeah.
create a backdrop where that's comfortable and
Yeah.
it's there's like a honest give and take in that. It's both about asking the questions, being willing to share your own stories, and so
Yeah.
because nobody wants to feel like they are the project.
For sure.
And that's something that I've noticed that you're particularly good at is just investing in both sides of the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't trust you and if they're not comfortable with you, it's not going to be successful.
So 15 years, give or take, in that space.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
So I relocated from Philly to South Carolina. And I didn't love the standards of sort of long-term care, meaning lots of different levels, and listen, I have to go to bed at night being proud and happy about what I did that day. And I just wasn't getting that. And I was like, I mean, we don't have a great system. If you ask any adult child who's put their loved one into long-term care, whether it's even independent living, assisted living, memory care, skilled care, there's gaps.
Right.
And, it's frustrating. And so
you were seeing that from the perspective of from the long-term, as an insider in the long-term care
Yeah.
world, right?
yeah, and it's like, well, wait a minute. This family's paying $8,000 a month and mom's not getting what she needs.
Yeah.
Like this, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I have to do better somehow.
So then what?
There came care management.
So talk me through
Yeah.
what your mindset was. How do you, first of all, explain what care management is?
Yeah, so care management is a person-focused look at aging. And basically, a care manager serves as the focal point for an aging senior, right? So we are the main point person. So you have their cardiologist, You have their neurologist, you have maybe home health care, home care, but you are the leader in that. Like, who's their advocate? We're the process owner.
Yes.
So we look at the big picture and we organize the care.
So how did you get, I can understand identifying that there were gaps in execution or that the system wasn't working well for everybody. So I want to kind of work on the other side to facilitate better outcomes, like connect those dots for me a little bit.
Yeah, it wasn't working. There were people not getting what they need. And so there came Barron Care Management. And, we act as the glue. Like, as the great Fred Rogers said, look for the helpers. It sounds silly, but we're the helpers. It's like when a senior gets told you have to recheck your electrolytes in a week. Like, who's owning that? Their care manager is owning it.
And so how did you know how to do it? Like, what skills did you bring with you from your time in senior living,
Yeah.
and your educational background, and what did you learn as you went?
Well, it's funny. Like, when I first started the business, I thought, well, like, this will be easy. I've worked in the senior care industry for almost 20 years, at that point. But it's everything, especially when you have a senior who's living in their home, which is what everybody wants to do now, right? There's such a push for that, obviously. And so, when you think about it initially, it's, okay, they have to get to their doctor's appointments. They have to have an up-to-date medication list. You have to communicate with their adult child who may or may not live out of state. But then their water heater breaks, which is not like, I don't know anything about water heaters.
Right.
But this individual lives here. We are their point person.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so we have to help. And I think that's one of the cool things about Barron Care Management. Like, we do everything. The answer is yes. What is the question? Like, right?
Yeah.
I know. It sounds cheesy.
No, that's great.
But, when you take on the role of a care manager and an adult child calls you and says, my dad wants to go to this show downtown at 7:00 on a Saturday. It's important to him. How is that not as important as his cardiologist appointment on Tuesday? And so I think that's part of the success in Barron Care Management, is that we look at the whole senior, not just the clinical part.
How important are your partnerships in the community? It seems like you're part of what you do is you've got to kind of know where to turn for everything.
It takes a village, right? I'm not a financial advisor, nor does anyone want financial advice from me. Not my forte. And, that's part of aging, is understanding where you are financially, what care you can and cannot afford. And so, that's a huge part of what we do. Know the experts in your area, right? And so part of it's connecting them with the resources in the community they need, whether that is an occupational therapist that can come into their home to do home modifications. We're not the experts in occupational therapy and home modifications. It's our job as a care manager to connect our client with that expert. So we do a lot of that. Elder law attorneys, home care companies.
Home health,
Home
I'm
health.
sure. Yeah.
Clinicians.
I'm fascinated by this issue that we've run up against for all these years, which is the inherent reactivity
Yeah.
to that's involved in this process of aging, particularly confusing or inconsistent when it comes from otherwise very planned, very type A, well-resourced, capable families or scenarios.
Yeah.
And so that has been the genesis of so many new relationships from us, has been hyper reactive
Yeah.
in an emergency.
Yeah.
So I'd like to understand if that is your experience too, and just and talk a little bit about that as an issue.
Yeah, it's interesting when you like step back and think about it. You think about like being a parent and having a child in high school, and you just automatically start these conversations about college. Right? Where do you want to go? Where should we look? We should register for the SATs. You should take the course to prepare you, right? There's all of these conversations. It's exciting, it's happy. Grandparents are excited about it, it's talked about. Families go together on these look trips to look at campuses.
It's inevitable, it's coming.
Right. It's the same with aging. It's happening to all of us. But no one wants to talk about it or learn about it or plan for it. And I think there's a stigma to it, to aging. Not necessarily just aging, but becoming frail. Nobody wants to become frail, and nobody wants to talk about it when and if they are. It's rare.
So is it, so tell me about, in general terms, who raises their hand and finds someone like you, and when they do in their process?
With care management, it's a little different than home care. People are typically less in crisis, I would assume. But, we certainly get, hospital referrals where my mom's in the hospital and we don't think she can go home and she was driving a week ago. We get that phone call. Sort of help us meet mom, put a plan together. We get a lot of referrals from elder law attorneys. Again, another planning piece that everyone's happy to do, right? They go to their elder law attorney, they get a living will, they get their documents in place, so to speak. And if they're lucky, the elder law attorney will say, you should think about engaging a care manager, especially if adult children don't live nearby or they're not involved. And so that's always a really great timeline, And then sometimes we get the phone call from the senior themselves and they'll say, well, it was really great, but I don't need you. And then, hence the crisis.
So in some of those situations, the elder law attorney is saying, this is good practice.
Right.
You should, in addition to getting, I'm glad we reviewed your parents' estate and their powers of attorney are in order. And they're connecting the dots and saying there's actually another step you can take.
Right.
In equipping another professional to come alongside of you. One of my hypotheses is that one of the reasons that folks don't plan as well for the chapter that you support with is because it's just not obvious how to do it.
Yeah.
And, as you said, the estate planner, the financial planner, the suite of medical professionals, like, they're findable, they're understood, there are commercials about those services. Mm-hmm. And my sense is I'm constantly telling people, did you know that there is a function, that there is a service, that there is a professional practice called geriatric care management.
Yeah.
And so the fact that and by and large, it takes people, like, they are unaware.
Right.
It takes them by surprise. And so I do think, does that resonate with you? Do you feel like...
Yeah. If you think back to years and years ago, like, you lived at home and then you went to an institution.
Right.
There was no in between. Even in terms like, adult day centers, new, people don't think about that.
I'm wondering what you find yourself clarifying for folks when they come in the door. If there are themes that are like, oh yeah, everyone seems to misunderstand this thing or that thing.
Yeah.
To me, again, the first and primary misunderstanding is like that there is someone like you, that
Yeah.
there are people like you out there.
Yeah.
But what else? What else comes up?
So people will say to us, well, I don't need help bathing. It's like, well, that's not what we do. You know,
Yep.
I can still drive. Okay, but, your bills haven't been paid in 3 months.
Got it.
There's past due envelopes sitting on your, kitchen table.
So is it a lot of adult children bringing you in?
Yes. Yeah. And the other piece to care management that I never fully understood until I was in it and running it was the family dynamic. Huge. So you have this family unit, which is so important, and they're rock stars. Brother loves sister, sister loves brother, super tight-knit family. And then you have an aging parent who becomes frail. It can be really hard on the family unit, and I'm sure you experienced this at Commonwise. The adult child who lives out of state has thoughts and suggestions and opinions, and the adult child who lives in town with mom or dad, they're doing the day-to-day. They show up in the ER, and the parent goes in, and we get phone calls and they'll say, we have always been so close with my mom, my dad, etc. And we are fearful that we are destroying our relationship with them because we are trying to help them. Mm. And that was a big learning piece for me, was how do we support the families and, do the hand-holding through that process. Because, that's a big part of it. And so a lot of it is education. Like, you say to the adult child, listen, your role is to be a son. That's your role,
Is it hard, too, for... My sense over the years is that, particularly in the situation that you described, where you've got one person that has a naturally outsized role, one adult child, mm-hmm. and the others that are trying to sort of fall in line, align, express their own perspectives on things, and are eager to help too in any ways that they can, but that itself needs a quarterback. The process of aligning all the adult children together and maximizing their strengths and coordinating that effort, it's almost a different job, and you've got adult children that are busy and stretched. Yeah. And so they're barely getting to do the thing, let alone saying, well, let me play the role of quarterback in this so that I can Sally your boots on the ground but we're, Bill, you're going to take care of meals. Like whether that's through Instacart, whatever it is, and like you're going to call me and I'm going to audit, mm-hmm. It takes its own quarterback. And so huge. I imagine that's another role you're playing is quarterback among the different.
Yeah, and I really had no idea how that need, until you get in it and you start talking to those adult children.
Yeah.
And, it's scary. It's scary to have an aging parent. It's scary to have a sick parent. I think another piece to the family dynamic with an aging parent is there are people that are natural caregivers. Right? I mean, this is the industry we work in, right? It's the people we try to hire. And then there are people that are just not caregivers. They're wonderful people.
Right.
I know a lot of them.
Yes.
They were not built to be caregivers.
Right.
And I don't necessarily mean bathing and dressing, but just, like I'm going to drop everything and I'll be there in 27 minutes.
Right.
There's that person.
Right.
And that's a big piece of the family dynamic. And I will have that conversation with the families and say, listen, like, it's a gift. You're a caregiver. Your sibling is not.
Yeah, this isn't, I don't want this to be an infomercial for geriatric care management, but there is so much utility in it. And one, I think, like, both being able to bring someone in who's not part of the family, just an outsider with a good knowledge base
Yeah.
and a capacity and a desire to be helpful is one thing. But bringing in a professional that has kind of a pseudo white coat effect,
Yeah.
where I imagine that empowers, it takes the edge off for everybody, the older adult, the
Yeah.
adult children.
Yeah.
Is that your experience?
For sure. And, I don't want to generalize, but no senior or aging, frail individual wants to be told what to do by their children.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a role reversal, right? Like, and I don't think most adult children want to tell their parents what to do. And, I remember years ago, I was working with a family and they said, listen, Dad should not be driving. And my brothers talked to him and I've talked to him. We've been working on this for a year and we have been unsuccessful. And again, like I said earlier, we're afraid we're damaging dad. They're saying they're afraid they're damaging their relationship with their dad. And I went in as a care manager and met with the senior and sat down and said, look, what are your goals? Like, what do you feel like is working in your life? What's important to you? What are your concerns? And 20 minutes later, he handed me his car keys. And the adult children were like, wait a minute. I said, I'm not his kid.
Yeah.
You know?
There is something, and I'd like to get into this about how you structure those conversations and who hosts them and when.
Yeah.
That is kind of critical. And so a couple of dynamics I'd love your perspective on. One is just this, I'm really testing this as a hypothesis. I could be wrong about this. But I do wonder how often folks are on both sides of this equation. You've got older adults themselves, and you've got adult children. And I wonder how often both are deferring to the other and waiting for the other to make the decisions.
Yeah.
I would particularly adult children thinking like, I'm deferring up to my parent about what they want. They're the parent, like I'm gonna defer.
Yeah.
And maybe some of those older adults thinking like, when the time comes, like I'm good until I'm not good, and I'm deferring down to my children. They'll step in when the time comes, even if there's not a consciousness around that.
Yeah.
Like that exists, and so it's kind of this like, both are deferring to each other, and neither has authority.
Yeah.
That creates this paralysis. Like I just am fascinated,
It's a great
fixated.
description.
I'm fascinated by how so many people get to crisis. So many people get to crisis and what's
Yeah.
happening. And so your example about the car keys is a great one, right? Like they're working on it. They know there's a problem. They can't get anywhere. They're busy. They're professionals. They
Yeah.
have their own lives and challenges, and they can only spend so much time. The observation, of course, about how much damage do you want to do to achieve your goal.
Right.
That's a really, it's not one that I've been hyper conscious of. Like that would be a big impediment to me.
Yeah.
Not wanting to destroy my relationship while trying to protect my loved one.
For sure. I mean, what a terrible spot to be in. If I do this or make this decision for my parent, they will never speak to me again. It's scary.
Yeah, another dynamic that I wonder, that I've noodled on is the mismanagement of these conversations, the well-intended mismanagement of these interactions. I imagine many of them take place passively as opposed to intentionally, right? Like we're after dinner and something has happened at dinner and Sally's just like, Mom, and right, and so it's like it's not a staged conversation with a particular goal.
Right.
It's rooted in anxiety as so much, like, and we might as well just say Jeff, right? Like I'm the king of anxiety, and so I wonder how many of those conversations just get launched on the wrong footing, and
Yeah.
then it's really hard to get back on kilter.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why we end up in crisis mode. It's like seniors have an annual Medicare visit with their primary care doctor, and there's a long list of questions. It talks about their mood and, eyes, ear, all the physical stuff. Like, where is the annual meeting with the care manager? Like, of course we all just want to go to bed one night and not wake up the next morning when we're 97 years old.
Sure.
But it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And so, that's the conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah, maybe even more often than annual, but I completely agree.
Right. Like,
I think that it's very possible that the notion of senior living it's the 800-pound gorilla in these conversations. And it's so, it's so inflammatory to many older adults, not all, but many, that if that piece gets introduced too soon or incorrectly, then it's a planning killer, because it empowers older adults to say, like, I ain't doing that.
yeah.
We're done. Conversation's over. We're done.
Yeah.
I will stay here. But that's but that's one of 9 planning steps of 100 planning steps. And it's just, I think, the most concrete one. So when folks start that conversation and they get there too quickly, they haven't structured it in the way that you structured it.
Well, and I think, I was on a call with a family. It was like a new initial phone call. And the person on the phone said to me, but what care will I need? This was like ahead of the game planner, which is great. It's the rare phone call you get.
Yeah, I love that call.
And I said to the person, I don't have a crystal ball. And so I think that's why people don't want to do it.
Right.
Because you just don't know.
Right.
I have a wonderful colleague I worked with years ago, and she said, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And when you're planning, you are preparing for the worst, right?
Yes.
There's people that pass away in their sleep. There's people that are sick for 3 days. There's people that are sick for 3 months. And there's people that are sick for 3 years.
I find it interesting. I find it comforting that the reality is that it's not that complicated how to plan for this. And frankly, it's 80% of it is just education.
Right.
It's
knowing the options.
Knowing the options. So to be able to sit down with someone and say, their question is like, what am I going to need, and when might I have to move to senior life? Like, to the extent that you can get in the room and have that conversation.
Yeah.
There's not that many options.
It's not rocket science.
It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
It's just people don't know where to go for the education.
Yeah.
There's this hurdle of getting into the room, getting everybody bought in and getting into the room.
Yeah.
But how often do you hear after one conversation, I feel so much better? Every single
99?
conversation.
Yeah.
And so if you can accomplish that level of anxiety reduction in one conversation, what does that say about the complexity of the problem? It says you need someone who understands it, and you need someone to go to. Of course, such is the case with every problem.
Yep.
And so I find that I believe that there are millions of people in this country today living with low-grade, mid-grade, and high-grade anxiety about this issue.
Without a doubt.
And it's so easily mitigated. It's so easily relieved.
Yeah.
Now, challenges will come that will create, acute moments of anxiety again.
Sure.
But sitting down and getting planned for this, such that either you put a plan in place immediately, or you know what you're going to do
Right.
in the event of an emergent situation, even if I know it's this person I'm going to call,
Yeah.
it's paradigm shifting, is it not?
100%. I was on a call with, it was a husband and a wife, but the husband was the well spouse. And he and I were on the phone recently. And I was explaining to him, he was a primary caregiver for his wife who had some cognitive impairment, some physical issues. And he said, well, I'm doing all of that. I take her to all the doctor's appointments. I get her prescriptions refilled. It's that undying spouse love and, caregiving. And I said to him, so I want to have another part of this conversation with you. What if something happens to you? And his answer to me was, well, it's not going to.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like...
Oh, that's tragic.
Well, and this is a husband and a wife that have no adult children nearby.
He was saying, it can't.
Yeah.
It can't happen to me. Like, I can't even open my mind and heart to that.
Yeah.
But I bet after he had that conversation with you, like, it's the first step to allowing him to
even wrap his brain around that.
Right, because there's an adjunct solution.
Mm-hmm. And I said, look, like, if you go to the emergency room,
I am here.
Then we're going to be with you. Like, he could have cared less about himself. Like, I'm in the ER. But, like, who's going to take care of my wife? Who's going to put something in place that she's safe and cared for?
And who then is going to make his decisions, right?
Right. And how often is it that you hear that the well spouse or the caregiver gets sick or has a crisis before the frail?
Often.
Right, because they're the ones
carrying
lifting.
the weight.
Yeah, they have caregiver burnout. I mean, that's also another podcast.
It's really true. I've not heard that term, well spouse. I like that term.
Yeah. Or they perceive themselves as the well spouse.
Sure.
But they're also not well.
Right.
I'm looking at them thinking, your wife you're taking care of looks in better shape than you.
Right. I'm going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but like one of the major anxiety drivers for adult children is cognitive impairment, dementia, Alzheimer's, and where their loved one may or may not be on that spectrum and how to plan around that, how that impacts their planning. And it really does. It's a really different lens to plan for aging through. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think the hard part of a dementia diagnosis is the diagnosis. It's, oh, well, like, we've had concerns for 4 years. It's like, and you waited.
Right.
It's we talked about the stigma of aging, and boy, a lot of stigma with cognitive stuff.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. No one, I mean, these are people that were and are brilliant human beings, and then they have, this horrific, cognitively debilitating disease that starts to slowly chip away.
Yeah, the slowness of it. It's like a frog in water, right? And I can imagine, too, it would be a super easily avoided step to get it confirmed.
Yeah.
Why bother? It's only going to bring you pain. Might be the instinct. It's a little bit like, well, I TMI, but why not? My doctor said, like, I have cancer in my family, and he said, you can do these blood tests. You can do this, like, genetic testing.
Yeah.
And my dad, who's a retired physician, said, like, yeah, you can, but they're going to find some number's going to be elevated somewhere, and it, like, that will lead you down a path and then another path, and it may create a lifelong ambiguity. And, you look at something, and when you look for something, you tend to find something.
Yeah.
So it's really easy to say, like, maybe we're going to look away from this for a while, and maybe forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And, now and I also think, when people think about dementia, like, there's not a cure.
Yeah.
with cancer, you can try to fight it
Right.
and treat it. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, there are some good meds, as you know, but so I think that's a big part of it. There's not a fix, or there are support services. Speech therapy can have a cognitive, but people don't know that.
Any observations about planning for a loved one with dementia? So let's say someone was sitting in front of you and husband and wife, and one of the spouses has, is young, they have maybe early onset, and they're saying, like, we're really eager to plan. We really want to get this right.
Yeah.
Would prefer not to move, but talk to us about.
So when you're pre-planning for someone who has an early diagnosis of dementia, I think one of the biggest concerns and one of the issues around that diagnosis that's really hard is wandering and safety. Right? Like like, of course we can get someone to come in and help bathe dad if he can't do that anymore, or we'll tell the waitress before we sit down at the table that he has an impairment, and if
Right.
But the wandering piece is really important when it comes to planning. There's safety measures in the home, nighttime, safety is an issue. And so I think that's a big piece.
It can be brutally, consistent's not the right word, but never ending, right? You've got the constant oversight.
Yeah.
And how that impacts your ability to live life,
Right.
and the cost of bringing in support.
Yeah. And I think just the ability, again, this trend of we want to stay in our home, or, we are in the independent living villa or over 55, and we don't want to go to assisted living or, a higher level of care. And so to learn and understand how to keep someone safe is a big part of it.
The risk of wandering, the risk of your loved one being alone, it's a continuum, right? For a while, maybe mom can be alone, and then probably shouldn't be alone at night. And so it builds in that way, does it not?
Yeah.
And so there isn't, you wouldn't say definitively, I'm coming at it from that perspective of, hey, we really want to stay home. Dad still golfs and he needs to get out of the house.
Yeah.
Maybe he's not a natural caregiver.
Yeah.
But we don't want to relocate. Can we start with some home care? Like,
Yeah.
it can be surgical for a while. Perhaps at some point it gets to the point where there's got to be someone there around the clock, and then it's an economic decision.
Yeah.
Fair. All.
Yeah, and I think, with aging parents and with anything in life, there's always some assumed risk, right? Like,
Right.
Your 14-year-old says, like, can I ride to that next stop? Can I ride to that friend's house who I know is further, and it's like, okay, but call me when you get there, right?
Right.
And so, it's the same with someone who has dementia or any aging senior, right? It's
Yes.
like, there's a van outing at my mom's community today, but I'm worried she could fall. You have to understand that there is some assumed risk in that.
You said that better than I've tried to articulate that many times and wrestled with that many times. I find that an important point to make to families, but a hard point to make well. And you just articulated that beautifully. But it's really true.
Yeah.
You've got to come to terms, and you've got to be on the same page to the extent that it's possible.
Yeah.
With what your older adult, what their tolerance for that assumed risk is.
Yeah.
They might be saying to you, subconsciously, or the undertone might be, I'm okay with this level of risk. I want to assume. You're saying to them, but you might fall in the middle of the night.
Right.
And they're saying to you, I don't care.
It's
I want to be here.
Yeah. It's a risk I'm willing to take.
It's a risk I'm willing to take. And that's okay. That's okay. And from our vantage point, we have to, that's hard. That's a little hard because our folks are carers and they want to be there and they want to foreclose as much risk as possible.
Yep.
And usually the people that are calling us are also trying to foreclose all the risk.
For sure.
But we then end up in a position like you that we have to say, like, listen, like, people, people of sound mind get to make their own decisions. And it's okay to make the decision to take on more risk.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and you also have to think about the benefit versus the risk, right? Like, and what is the negative impacts of not allowing that individual to do that?
Right.
Dad, you can't do that anymore. You can't golf. You could fall. Okay, well, Dad hasn't left the house in 17 days now.
Right.
Because that was his thing.
Right. And the psychological benefits and the social benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great.
I mean, there's
great
endless
mindset.
articles about social interaction and cognitive impairment.
Yeah.
That was another part about care management that I didn't realize was going to be such a big piece, was the social piece. The adult children will say to us, my mom used to have lunch with a friend every month, and she, those things have all stopped. And it's like, okay, make the appointment, call the friend, we'll get them there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, where's the breakdown?
Such a small effort for such a huge return.
Yeah. And I think you said this earlier, no one wants to be the specimen, no one wants to be the case. And so when you focus on that part, back to my therapeutic recreation roots, that's a part of it. Then they feel like you're looking at them as a holistic human being, not just a case.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's your standard advice when someone calls you and they're in Idaho and they're saying, I'm worried about Mom? What do I do?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the anxiety is about an adult child making the wrong decision. So, sometimes I'll get a phone call and they'll say, I've toured these 7 communities. I've called these 5 home care agencies. I've made spreadsheets of every single pro and con and price and, dollar per square foot. And they're afraid of making the wrong decision. And my advice is always, nothing is permanent. You engage a home care agency. If the first caregiver that comes out, your mom calls you and says, I didn't like her, then tell the agency you didn't like her. And the agency will work with you. The right agency will work with you to get the right person. Nothing is permanent. You move Dad to assisted living and he hates it, then you move him somewhere else.
Move him back home.
Or move him back home.
It's all possible.
Yeah, nothing is permanent. And that's a big key factor that I impress upon our families.
I think there's something generational about that too, where, I mean, even if you're 60 and you've got a 85 or 90-year-old parent, there was a lot more permanence to decisions 30, 40 years ago than there is today.
Yeah.
Very possible to change jobs or to move houses multiple times. And there isn't this kind of concreteness to each decision that maybe once existed.
Right. You pick a college, you go for a semester, it's not your jam.
Right.
You rework the plan.
Yeah.
Nothing is permanent.
When folks ask me that question, I know you can't say this, so I'm going to say it on your behalf. What do I do? What do I do in Idaho? I mean, it's ABC to me, very simple. You look up the care managers that are in and around and serve that area.
Yeah.
You find one that you like, you buy an hour's worth of their time.
Yeah.
And you ask them the questions that are on your mind.
For sure.
You cannot do this online.
Yeah.
You can't get the right, accurate information about the resources that exist. Also, you need a guide. Even healthcare professionals virtually know nothing about this.
Yeah.
You need a guide that understands, a local guide that today, not 4 years ago, not 6 years ago, that today understands the landscape. Commonwise might have been great 5 years ago. Maybe we stink today.
Yeah.
You've got to know that.
Yeah.
And find a care manager, start with an hour. It'll cost you $100, whatever it costs you.
For sure.
And you're 80% of the way there.
Yeah. Well, and that's the hard part about long-term care. You know, that building is only as good as the human beings working in it that day. So, yeah. You know, I mean, most of my career was in assisted living and long-term care, and I was, you know, I drank the juice. And in my 8 years in care management, there's such a value to keeping people in their home, regardless of whether or not they have Commonwealth home care. But Commonwealth home care is always an added bonus. But, you know, the price point of having someone in long-term care versus bringing support services into their home, it's huge. And I think emotionally it's huge. You know, everybody likes home. Even when you're on that amazing vacation.
Yeah.
There's something about going home.
I think commonly misunderstood that you can pretty much stay home no matter what.
Yeah.
Folks have
Definitely misunderstood.
Folks have an instinct that the acuity of their care at some point will get to the level where they can't be at home anymore. That's not what breaks.
Right, and especially when the word hospice comes into the conversation. Like, people don't know that you can have that in your home.
Right.
You know?
All right, let's wrap up. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. Really insightful, really valuable conversation. And we'll do it again sometime.
Thanks for having me.